Vincent Kennedy McMahon, a marketing genius, ruthless competitor, and a story to be told. They could make a movie on this man's life. And no, he wouldn't be the good guy in it, but it would be entertaining nonetheless. Vincent Kennedy McMahon, born August 24th, 1945. Better known as Mr. McMahon, the self-made billionaire. His life wasn't that simple. In the first 12 years of his life, his father was completely absent. He was living with his mother and his stepfather. His stepfather, who was extremely abusive. And actually, there have been many rumours and comments about his mum actually being quite abusive. But his stepfather was by far the worst. In fact, there's an interview, I believe, and I'm paraphrasing here. Vince said, "My only regret is I didn't kill him myself." I mean, Vince has always kind of been known for being kind of boisterous and angry and not scared to be opinionated. But that there kind of sets the foundation for the man that we all know today. As in, he is somebody who came from a struggle and he knows it and he felt it. And unlike in business, on a more personal level, he couldn't always just put his problems behind him. Truly, one of the criticisms I have of this documentary shouldn't even come as a surprise. We don't really leave this 6-part episode knowing that much more about Vince McMahon. If you are a wrestling fan, then there's nothing in those 6 episodes that you didn't already know. But there was more of Vince on camera than probably in any other situation, really, as far as I know. Having said that, it's important to say that with all the controversy that came out, the latest lawsuit that came out, because there have been plenty prior, I think it limited Netflix. Now, the crazy thing is, WWE, after all these years of being independent and being family owned, because it was family owned for decades, it got bought out by the TKO group and it merged with companies like the UFC. This was a huge $1 billion deal, and with that came other things like Netflix will start streaming Monday Night Raw. So when I was kind of like hearing about this amidst all the controversy, I thought to myself, how are Netflix going to spin this? Because Netflix is the biggest streaming platform on the planet, and they are doing a documentary about a very controversial figure, maybe the most controversial figure over time in the wrestling world. So how are they going to spin this knowing that it could affect their viewership? Now, granted, Vince is no longer a part of the company, but Vince created the company. So if you're Netflix, what do you do? Well, I think after the 6 episodes, our answers were indirectly given. And that's that they didn't really paint him as a great man. And now you might be thinking, well, why should they? Of all these allegations against him, all these scandals over time, the repeated measures he took to keep other companies out of business or to beat his competition. But you got to understand, in the world of marketing, in the world of millions and billions, sometimes companies spin narratives to keep their stars or their lead shows in the right light. But what Netflix have done is that they've given you the evil side of Mr. McMahon. They've tried to justify it or explain it through his childhood and his greater-than-life ambition. But hey, that's up for debate. What struck me was, this isn't the first time controversy has circled Vince or anyone famous. And usually what they do is they send a few press releases, they make sure that the guy only speaks through his lawyer, and then they wait for it to blow over. And he did that the first time around. But this latest scandal was the one where it really hit deep. It has been reported that over the last 2 decades, Vince McMahon has paid over 20 million in hush money, right? Let that sink in. 20 million. At different times to different female employees. Now, the most famous one was probably Sable. Sable, who later goes on to actually marry Brock Lesnar, and Brock Lesnar, who has a great relationship with Vince McMahon, and Brock Lesnar, who's also kind of mentioned in this latest scandal. So it's all kind of coming a bit full circle here. Here's how bad it was. The latest scandal, they took out Brock Lesnar from the original intro. You know that intro where it's like, now, then, forever? The wrestling one? Mate, Brock Lesnar is nowhere to be seen. He's been taken out of the official gameplay as well, which is very shocking considering that he is one of the biggest superstars of the last decade. I mean, since Brock Lesnar made his return, he beat the street. You know, for those of you that watch wrestling, he had a long feud with the likes of John Cena and Roman Reigns. So he's been one of their main attractions. But this scandal is so serious that they've taken him out of it as well. Furthermore, what you have is Vince completely stepping down and for the first time ever selling the company off, and there is not a McMahon on the top, right? Stephanie stepped down because of her issues. The closest thing you have now to a family member of the McMahon family is the son-in-law, Triple H, who is married to Stephanie McMahon. Now listen, I did say that companies try to do things to make themselves look better. I think roughly 2 days after the allegations of this latest scandal, which there's quite a bit of evidence for, and it is all alleged. Can I just say that? This is all alleged. Allegedly, right? It's not been proven yet. But what they did was they got Dwayne Johnson to become one of the main board members on TKO. Because they realized we have to protect our investment. Okay, fine, Vince can no longer be a part of this, but the TKO group have still just acquired the World Wrestling Entertainment. So, what do? You get arguably the most famous figure ever in wrestling, and a very squeaky clean one in Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to become a board member. You can't do that with many other wrestlers. Like, you couldn't do that with Hulk Hogan. He's got 1,000,001 different allegations on his ass, right? The public perception of Hulk Hogan has gone downhill. Yes, he might still be an American icon, but the fact of the matter is you're going to put him on a board of directors. So it's understandable why you would go and take Dwayne Johnson. But Hulk Hogan is a perfect tangent to this as well because, like I said, Vince McMahon, the storyteller, Vince McMahon, the marketer, when he was coming up in the WWE before WrestleMania 1, before WrestleMania 2, he was thinking about how to get the attention of America. Wrestling wasn't always what you see today. These days, everyone knows about WWE. These days, there's always a couple of kids on the playground who shouldn't, but are trying different moves and playing with their friends. And, it's a staple. And it's very much ingrained within American culture. Part of that is the American culture narrative. When Hulk Hogan was coming up, one of the biggest ways they made him a star was to play this all-American character, which, by the way, was all Vince. Now, granted, in the documentary, Hulk says it himself, it takes two to tango. But anytime Hulk was saying something, it was Vince. It was Vince behind the camera saying, right, this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to market it. And what they did was they had this classic, legendary feud with the Iron Sheik. At the time as well, when America had political tensions with Iran. And they pulled on the heartstrings of the American people and said, we've got the ultimate baby face for you. This big, strong, blonde, American, larger-than-life character who's going to beat the Iron Sheik, and he's going to do it as a proud All-American. And it's things like this that really have made wrestling what it is today, because through the magic of storytelling, Hulkamania was born. Hulk Hogan, the icon, was born. And WWE, as you know it, was born. Honestly, I'm not trying to glorify a man who's currently got some serious allegations, but if we just put that aside for a second and just talk about the sheer ruthlessness of this guy to succeed, it is second to none. It's comparable to the likes of Dana White when they tell their stories about how relentless they were and how long it took them to make it, and how they took a company from, small bit of notoriety to being worth billions. The turning point was definitely WrestleMania 1 for Vince. He'd done the magic of storytelling. But WrestleMania 3 broke records, especially for a wrestling crowd. Again, this was not always that big. Vince made wrestling what it is today. And they claim that 93,000 people were in attendance at WrestleMania 3. And this was Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. Another form of storytelling. They talk about Hulk versus Andre, once in a lifetime, never before. The power and ferocity of Hulk and the sheer size and ruthlessness of Andre the Giant. They sold you a narrative. But back then, you didn't have social media. You couldn't just go on Google and say, has there ever been a match between Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant? So you believed it, unless you were completely aware of everything. And through this, became hype, and that's what you gotta do. Like, whenever you're starting something, you gotta give people a reason to tune in, and then an even better reason to stick around. And this was what Vince did in abundance. Now, that comes with failure. You can't always just get it right. But when you keep trying to build new stars, you get there eventually. If you have ever seen any images of the wrestlers back in the day, especially in that early period, you would think one thing: steroids. And you know what? You wouldn't be mistaken. That's another scandal that Vince has had to deal with. They had a doctor in at the time who was there to take care of the wrestlers and administer painkillers. But apparently, on the lowdown, without Vince knowing, this guy was selling steroids. Now, steroid abuse became very common within the WWF. And like I said, you look back to the wrestlers of that time, Hulk Hogan, Iron Sheik, they were ripped. But everyone was doing it. This was partly Vince's argument, all of America, all of the bodybuilders, all of the biggest guys on TV, it stunk of steroids. But that doesn't mean that it's not illegal. Long story cut short, it's another thing that Vince beat in court, but the interesting thing was that the federal government was after Vince and they really wanted to get him. So, they wanted to get Hulk Hogan to testify against Vince McMahon. Hulk kind of brought them along on a string and said, yeah, you know what? I will give you what you want. And at this point, Vince knows about it, and Hulk and Vince, after having such a great professional and personal relationship, that's kind of now being shattered. Vince is thinking to himself, my biggest star is about to take the seat as a witness to testify against me. But then Hulk Hogan probably pulled off one of the biggest upsets for the federal government ever, as he sat there and he said, yeah, I have taken steroids. Vince didn't tell me to take steroids. Vince didn't sell me steroids. Vince didn't encourage steroids within the WWF. And then Vince comes out clean. Vince is what they call John Gotti. They called him the Teflon Don. Teflon is a substance and nothing really sticks to it. And people like Vince, this is what you call them. Because no matter what it was, whether it was competition or cases against him, Vince would just find a way to shoot it down. I would not even be too surprised if in a year or two, somehow he came out clean of these allegations. But the difference is this time, we have a lot of screenshots from the previous female that used to work with Vince. We have other people directly named, Brock Lesnar in this case, John Laurinaitis, who, by the way, if you've seen wrestling, John Laurinaitis on screen was very annoying. He had this like really strange voice as well. I don't know why Vince decided to keep him on for so long. It's looking different for the man, and he's getting old. He probably doesn't care as much. But people like Vince, they will do anything they can do to win. Let's take another tangent, and let's go to the Monday Night Wars, as they called it. WCW came into town, and they started poaching some of WWF's, at the time, WWF, not WWE, some of their biggest talent, including the likes of Hulk Hogan. This was another reason why Hulk and Vince were not getting along, but obviously I think the way he made up for it on the trial, and eventually, as you know, he does return back to the WWE and all of this type of stuff. But for 83 weeks, led by the brilliant storyteller Eric Bischoff, WWE or WWF was getting its arse handed to it every Monday night. They could not win to save their lives. And the reason is because Vince wanted to cater to the younger audience, whereas Eric was like, not really, I want to focus on 18 to 35. This is where the money will come in. These are the people that are filling up my stadium or live events, whatever you want to call it. WWE had no idea what to do until the Attitude Era, as they called it. And this was when the boisterous, flamboyant likes of DX came along. But can I just say as well, this is why, for nobody who's ever seen wrestling, this is why there should never really be a surprise about all the sexual allegations that have come out against wrestlers in the past or against Vince McMahon, because that time period as well, women were kind of just objectified. Women spent more time in their bikinis than they did wrestling in the ring. They were constantly objectified by the WWE stars, by, I guess, the fans in a way, like what they turned up for. And Sable, by the way, who we mentioned, there were plenty of occasions where Sable would get more ratings than everybody else on that Monday night, on that segment that she was on, because of how attractive she was, because of how much they had her showing, live on air. And I suppose the argument from the likes of Vince would be, we were a product of our time. At the time, American pop culture was completely sex-crazed. So in the documentary, this is what they all say. They say that once again, we tapped in to American culture. We looked at what was working. We looked at what was relevant. And we talk about pop culture a lot on this podcast. And we gave it to the fans. And we said, this is what you want. Ask and you shall receive. The controversy, though, in that sense, is that someone like Eric Bischoff would say, well, I was doing this first. Yes, but Vince did do it better. Eventually. Because 83 weeks is a lot of time, by the way. That's well over a year. But another way in which Vince managed to win once again, another narrative of storytelling, was by being the tyrant boss. Now, he will say this as a character. The Vince that you saw in a WWE ring is very different to the Vince behind the scenes. But Vince is a workaholic. He lives and breathes his job. So there was a lot of real life elements of Vince McMahon that came through in the character, the boss, the tyrant, Vince McMahon. Vince was aggressive. Vince would do anything he could do to win, including things like the Montreal Screwjob. And actually, even before that, there was a female wrestler who was once stripped of her title because she wouldn't listen to Vince. Now, Vince wasn't just the owner. Not only was he also courtside announcing for many years, but on top of all of this as well, You have somebody who's in creative control of the company. And with that came the rise of Vince McMahon versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. This by far is one of the most famous storylines ever sold. Because for those of you that don't know, and very few of you would be misinformed on this, the WWE is scripted. It's not fake. There are injuries, people do get hurt, but the way the wrestlers perform is done in a manner in which you already know what's going to happen at the end of the match. And the storylines are made oftentimes months in advance. So Stone Cold Steve Austin was always meant to beat up the Tyrant Boss. Because again, this was almost a part of American pop culture. You got to think about this is a very capitalistic country where people are working for their shitty bosses, and they would love to just sock one in the face of their boss. And although Vince couldn't give you that, Vince could not give you the power to have you beat up your boss. Vince could give you himself embarrassed on camera, on a live TV audience, and that made everybody feel good. And that was the rise of Stone Cold Steve Austin. And some of those segments were iconic. The abuse, the things that Steve would do, the storytelling was off the scales. And all of this character, this crazy Vince McMahon, was just getting his ass handed to him. But even then, the fans loved him. Yes, they wanted Stone Cold to win, but the idea of Vince being like this and telling the story was absolutely unmatched. This is why he's such a brilliant storyteller. Further along the line, he brings his family into it. He really wants to show you how bad of a boss he can be. So he has this whole storyline with former WWE superstar Trish Stratus, where he's having an affair. And his real life wife, Linda McMahon, is a part of this storyline. And she, for many weeks, is sedated. Her character is sedated. And Vince and Trish are getting up to some of the most craziest things on camera. Again, building this narrative. Because what you have in wrestling is good guys and bad guys. And you have the art of storytelling. And when you boo the bad guy, that means they've done a good job. If you have a heel, the bad guy, so to speak, and you're cheering for him, then they're not particularly doing a very good job. You have to hate the heel. So you have to hate Vince. So what's worse? How badly can you hate Vince in a way where it's got you tuning in next week to see this guy get his ass kicked by the likes of Steve Austin? I'll tell you how. With him and his mistress or his girlfriend, whatever Trish was at the time. Of course, this was a professional thing. It wasn't one of the scandals. But yeah, it was absolutely iconic. And he brought other family members into this, including Stephanie McMahon and Shane McMahon. And they just sold you a story over and over and over and over again. The fact of the matter is as well, is that people like Vince, they expect to win. And he says this on the actual documentary. He says, I expect to win. And when you look at behind the scenes of this guy who's at every match, this guy who will do anything he can. Like if we just go back to the Montreal Screwjob, Bret and Vince had worked together for over a decade. But never would Vince let Bret walk out as champion to go to WCW, to one of his main competitors. And it didn't matter to him who he had to backstab in order to keep winning. And when you put all of this together, I ask you all, again, allegedly, are these scandals that much of a surprise? What does it take for someone like Vince to feel powerful when you have everything already? You've taken this company which you bought from your father, you've globalized it, I don't really know. I don't know if any of us can get into the mind of somebody like that. But it is, in many ways, quite remarkable. And I probably will get some heat for those comments because I think sometimes you take the good with the bad. I think if you look at someone like Vince, you can't just point and say that there is a horrible man, because you also enjoyed his product for many years. Now, if you're not a wrestling fan, then that's fine, that's you. But many of us who grew up watching wrestling always had an idea of this ruthless aggression that this man was capable of. And a lot of people would have you know that Vince on camera was very similar to Vince in real life. The situation that happened with Ashley Massaro, it happened while WWE was abroad, I believe in Iraq, doing one of their shows with the veterans or with the current soldiers. I don't really want to get into it, but all these cover-ups, they're inexcusable. And I guess we don't know if 100% Vince was aware of these and a part of these. But some people really will just do anything they can in order to win. And Vince McMahon seems to be one of them. If I was to criticize documentary, I would say if you're a non-wrestling fan, it was amazing. But if you're a wrestling fan, it didn't tell you or show you anything new. And Netflix, by the way, at the beginning of every episode, they kept saying, oh, most of this was filmed before Vince's allegations came out. Yeah, well, you know what, Netflix? A lot of Vince's allegations have been out for many years. But again, this goes back to the idea of marketing. Netflix has a deal with WWE. They will be showing Monday Night Raw live on their platform. So as much as they want to save face and say that this has nothing to do with our financial agreement and, oh, we might have not done these things had we known, well, people know these things. It's like currently the Diddy situation. People knew about Diddy. It wasn't just the likes of Cat Williams. People knew about Diddy. People in the industry knew about Diddy. People knew about R. Kelly, right? I remember growing up and listening to this song with Obi Trice, Eminem, and 50 Cent, and on the third verse, 50 Cent directly goes in to the R. Kelly allegations, and he basically says they're true. But again, people just acted like they didn't know. And then when these things come out, everyone just wants to act like they're all surprised. You think people didn't know about Harvey Weinstein in Hollywood? Everyone knows. If you're in those circles, you know what's going on. So these companies, before they bought out WWE, yes, they might have not been thinking about it. It might not have been their priority to think about Vince's scandals when negotiating these contracts. But people knew. And people do their due diligence. And they're aware with the risk that comes out. In this case, TKO have to save face and get rid of Vince, take him off the board. But all of these situations are the same. I make this joke. I'm like, did he do it? Yes, he did. He did. And he'll probably be in jail soon as well. But I don't know if Vince will be. That one remains to be seen. The strange thing about the legal system is that sometimes things can be settled outside of court, which is probably why Vince has been around for so long, because if you've given nearly 20 million in hush money to your employees over the years, then who's to say that he might not just do it again, And then once this blows over, Vince might even make a return. There were times during his reign, a very long reign as well, where he came out publicly in front of WWE and just said, I'm fighting these allegations and they are not true. And then you know what? A few months later, people just forgot about him. Society has a short memory. So there will be a lot of holier than thou people out here talking about what Vince did or what Vince didn't do, and companies would love to tell you they weren't involved, but sometimes when you're quiet, you're kind of like an accessory to the fact. So listen, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I don't usually do podcasts on my own, but I felt like I wanted to do this segment and kind of talk about the WWE and Vince. And I wanted to share my thoughts. And I want to know what you all think. You know, where do you think we will be with this in a few months? Next year even? Where are these allegations going to go? Is it going to blow over? But yeah, thank you so much. Like, comment, subscribe, all the usual. And I will see you out in the next one. Take care.